Welcome to Wellness Curated with me, Anshu Bahanda. Today, we are deep diving into psychological astrology, discovering what it is and how it can help us understand more about our life and ourselves. We probably all have heard of and know a bit about astrology. It's very popular. Indeed, in 2022, a poll of Americans found that 1 in 4 believe in astrology, plus a significant number of us have had therapy. So how do these work together? Here to explain more about this unique blending of two different but perhaps complementary disciplines, astrology and psychology, is my guest, Arya Punj Timblo. Arya is a professional adult and child psychotherapist and an experienced psychological astrologer who's been working in both these fields for the past 20 years. She also teaches psychological astrology online internationally. And that's how I came across Arya, through a friend who's doing a course with her. Welcome to the chat, Arya.
Thank you very much, Anshu. I'm very happy to be here today and with the team.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for making the time for us. Now, Arya, this word, psychological astrology, what is it?
Oh, my favorite topic. So, psychological astrology, the practice, welds together two of the most exciting fields for me. It is psychology and astrology, and specifically, it is the cross-fertilization of depth psychology. So when we're looking at psychology, there's so many fields of psychology, right, Anshu? I'm looking at it from a therapeutic form of astrology, predominantly the psychodynamic model that Freud and Jung, as well as a spiritual psychotherapist named Assagioli, he's an Italian psychotherapist, have blending from their theories and combining it with astrology. Now, more specifically, I'm also not looking at Indian Vedic astrology. I'm not looking at even Western predictive astrology. What I'm looking at is the psychology of the soul. I am particularly interested in the soul's journey, the soul's purpose. Why have we incarnated in this lifetime? Why do we have to go through certain experiences? And why do I have to meet certain people, go through certain kind of circumstances in order to grow and flower? And I really like this analogy, honestly, of like this whole plant analogy that happens, because the birth chart very beautifully depicts it. It's like, if you want to put it, a blueprint. It's a blueprint or map of your potential.
So would I be right in saying, Arya, that that this is basically psychological astrology, looks at you, looks at your soul, and helps you get to your best potential in this lifetime?
Yes, that's the way that I look at it. I have to also mention I'm a psychotherapist first. So I'm very much interested in helping a person to self-actualize themselves, realize who are they, what are they here for, what is their calling, so to speak.
I mean, I found psychological astrology fascinating. I'm someone who's fascinated with astrology anyway. I have, in a lot of our families, in a lot of the Indian families, we have been doing astrology. I mean, our birth chart is made the moment we're born. And that's Vedic astrology. That's more predictive astrology. And then I remember growing up, there was a book called Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, and that talked about the Western predictive astrology. But as Arya was explaining, this is different. Psychological astrology is basically combining psychology and astrology, which is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, because I think today, the way the world is today, the requirement for psychologists, it's probably the highest it's ever been. We will talk more about psychological astrology. We're going to delve more into current times and takeaways, and how just knowing where the planets are for you, can help you?
Psychological astrology is really looking at the soul's journey. So there is something psychologically, but from a spiritual psychology point of view, as well as looking at the theories of Freud, as well as Jung to understand the chart. I was talking about also how astrology really helps you to understand the blueprint of a person's potential. So I'm not really looking at the predictions. I'm really helping a person to understand who they are and what they're here to complete in this lifetime.
Okay. And explain to me, Arya, now, you know, we hear about the sun, the moon, the ascendants. Can you explain that for people? What does that involve? How does their own sun, moon, and ascendants affect them?
I think that's a really great question because I think most people have been familiar with their sun sign from a popular culture point of view. And also, of course, the moon sign is something that is particularly important in Indian astrology. When we talk about what's your Rashi, that is actually our moon sign. So, Indian Vedic astrology puts a lot of emphasis on the moon sign. So I'm going to start talking about the moon sign because very simply, the moon sign is basically comes very clear when we are born. So our moon sign is very much our emotional needs. So it is very much our emotional side and our emotional needs and what helps us to feel safe, what helps us to feel connected and bonded. Now, from
Okay.
a point of view, it also, from the chart, very faithfully reflects our image of the mother, our a priori or our innate tendency on how we would imagine our mother to be and how we experience her. So the energies that we pick up from her, as well as the bond or the relationship with her. And as psychology also knows, or attachment theory basically looks at, our initial relationship with our mother or our primary caregiver sets the prototype or the model for subsequent relationships. So, for example, very beautifully in the chart, you can see which is the kind of mother who is very soft and nurturing, the cookie baking type. You can see which of the mother's energy from the moon sign, if she's a fiery, if she's a motivated, if she's a driven person. The moon sign also gives us an idea of our genetic inheritance from our mother's side. So it can also help to tap into perhaps untapped potentials or talents, or perhaps also issues and fears and insecurities. Because as you know, having had children, our children very much pick up our greatest potential. They also pick up our fears and our insecurities and our issues, so to speak, for better or worse, right?
Yes.
Get passed on to our children. So our moon sign also in a nutshell helps us to understand our comfort zone. What soothes me? What helps us to feel safe and comfortable? Now, this sounds like it would be intuitive that everybody feels the same, but it's actually very different. For example, I have a son who is a very fiery moon sign. So he needs a lot of adventure. He needs to feel excited. He needs to feel challenged. He needs a lot of space to go out into the world and explore without anyone, kind of following him and telling him what to do. My other son needs a lot of safety. He needs prediction. He needs to know what our routine is going to be for the next week, so to speak. So you can see very different emotional needs each child will have and each person will have.
Yes. Yes, that's fascinating. I didn't know that the moon sign was about the mother. So that's great. Okay.
And if we're looking at the sun sign, our sun sign is very much like the moon is a reflection of our mother, the moon sign. Our sun sign and its relationship with other planets helps us to understand our potential in terms of what we've also genetically inherited from our father and our father's sun.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it also helps, yes, it also helps
Yeah,
us
no,
to,
go ahead.
yes. It also helps us to understand what is our meaning or purpose in this existence. What have I meant here to actualize? So our moon sign is what we have actually accrued from many lifetimes and we've mastered.
So moon or sun?
Your moon sign is what
Okay.
we have mastered in many other lifetimes. Hence, it is our zone in this lifetime. Whereas our sun sign is what we're meant to actualize in this lifetime. So it involves taking a risk. It involves challenging ourselves in a way that we have not maybe done. So it also involves letting go of the cocoon, our womb, our roots, all the safety things, and actually putting ourselves out into the world. So it's a bit like if you look at psychologically, the moon sign is like the maternal embrace, right? Our little And our sun is about spreading wings and flying, and also giving what Joseph Campbell, the psychologist, talks about, taking the call to adventure, the hero's quest, so to speak. So there's something about developing bravery to kind of going out into the world and making your mark, which is our sun sign.
Okay. Okay. And the ascendant?
The ascendant is actually not a luminary or a planet like the sun or moon sign, but it is an entry point of the chart. So
Arya, I'm going to stop you here. Before you carry on, will you explain the luminary to us before you carry on?
Sorry, good question. The luminaries are the sun and the moon because they're not technically planets. So we either refer to the sun or the moon as the luminaries.
Okay.
Because
Okay. And so there's someone who light up your path, so to say, literal translation. Okay.
Yes. Yes. So our ascendant is the entry point of the chart. So when we first meet someone, Anshu, we actually pick up their ascendant because it is the initial response or the initial energy we put out when we meet somebody. It is, when you look at the ascendant, it's kind of like the cover page of a book.
Okay.
So it is a very important part of the chart because the ascendant also serves the sun sign. So if you basically, it's called the ascendant or the rising sign because literally it's what comes across to the person, the first thing that rises or the first impression we give to others. The ascendant always serves the sun sign. So it's a bit like having a hero on a journey and having a sidekick. If I were to give it an analogy, the is the sidekick, the kind of resources and tools and the gifts that you have, which need to serve your sun.
So you're saying the ascendant when you likened it to the cover page of a book. So it's your first impression. So then how is it different from the sun or the moon sign?
Well, the moon sign is not something that, for example, our instinctual needs is not necessarily something that we're going to show to someone when we meet in a room, right? So in that, our ascendant is a bit like our mask. It's the persona that we put when we're with us. The ascendant is also something that has been socially acceptable in our family. So it has been the tools that our family has been using for survival. Ascendant is also the skills we needed to survive in order to get forward in our early childhood environment. So for example, someone who has a Gemini ascendant, Gemini is a sign of knowledge and learning, the eternal student and teacher. Someone would have honed the skills of intelligence, the intellect, the more objective kind of way of understanding reality as a way, question, answer, dialogue, communication as a way. So they would probably have grown up in an environment which was very cerebral, very academic, very eloquent and articulate in order to fit in with the family, so to speak.
So do you find that ascendants can be the same very often in families?
Well, interesting. That's an interesting question because usually our ascendant is a very accurate reflection of a very strong energy of our parents' chart.
Okay.
So for example, my ascendant is the exact degree of my father's sun sign and my brother's sun sign. So it's the my father wanted me to develop.
Okay. So there could be a connection because you're saying your ascendant is the degree of your father, the exact degree of your father's sun sign. I want you to explain that to us.
So every sign has around 30 degrees. And according to each degree, it becomes more and more accurate. So our ascendant will often very faithfully depict something of our early family, maybe our father or our mother's chart. So it would be the qualities that they wanted you to manifest. My father always wanted to be a teacher. So lo and behold, I became a teacher. So it is the unconscious, conscious qualities that your parents develop within you, so to speak, because that confirms for them and that encourages your potential to shine.
And Arya, as you're talking about degrees, will you now explain the birth chart also to us?
Sure. So when we are looking at calculating a birth chart, we need some information, some rather technical information. We need your time of birth, we need your place of birth, and we need your date of birth. I will briefly explain why each of these things are important. Now, the day of birth is very important because it helps us to understand the planets and where they are when you are born, and the relationship the planets make with each other. So, for example, your sun might be in Libra, for example, which is the sun in Libra's potential is to create an intellectual community, and also Libra's potential is art and beauty and the aesthetic dimension. So, your sun sign could be making other relationships with other planets.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you an idea of where the planets are on your date of birth, right? So each degree, it changes from day to day, right? Now, the place
Right.
of birth is important because it gives us the latitude and longitude of when you were born and how it's different. So me being born at 6 a.m. in India is very different from being born in London at 6 a.m. And the timing is important because honestly, literally every second counts in astrology because it gives you an idea of exactly what the ascendant is. Now, the ascendant we talked about is a very
Mm-hmm.
important part of our chart. So when we are trying to calculate the ascendant, we need to see which zodiac sign is at the eastern horizon the minute or the second we are born. And it makes a big
Right.
difference. Accuracy. I've actually done the chart for twins, and the 3 minutes difference gave them a very different ascendant. One was very bold, one was very confident. I know what I want, I know how to get it. The other one was very introspective. She was a bit of a shy person, reticent, and very much soul related. She wasn't really interested in going out into the world. She was very much soulful kind of person. So the few minutes in a birth chart can make a big difference.
Okay. And tell us, Arya, about the basic principles of psychological astrology.
Sure. I would like to also tell you a bit about the approach that I take, which is maybe differ from someone else's psychological astrology. Like I said, I very much look at the soul and the soul's evolution. So when I'm looking at how it really manifests, I'm looking at one of the basic premises is a premise that the Greeks believed in, as well as Socrates. He says, as above is so below. And what does
Hmm.
it mean? I want to basically simplify it and make it lucid. What that means is everything around me is a
Mhm.
reflection of my inner potential, which is meaning to manifest.
Mhm.
So, for example, if I'm surrounded, I had this one client coming to me, and she said, "All these people are so creative. I work with all these creative people. Why am I not creative?" I said, "I see in your chart a lot of creativity. The thing is, you're too scared to tap into it." So she's like, "I don't
Right.
understand, one after the other. I'm surrounded by artists and interior designers and fashion designers. I said it's a reflection of you. Your soul yearns to go
Mm.
into it, but it's your fears and inhibitions, her Saturn, the planet Shani, which inhibited her from actually going into developing that side of herself. So you can also see a lot of blocks that come into astrology. So the one thing is that
Right.
what surrounds you, and this also applies to relationships, Anshu. The person, our significant other, the person we work with, will have untapped potential within myself that I have not manifest yet. So it's a bit like being a role model or an outlet for me to connect to that part within myself. And the more self aware we are, the more we're able to realize this and work creatively with it and develop the things that are the facets which are meant to flower within our lifetime.
So this sounds fascinating, Arya. So, the combining of psychology and astrology, because a lot of people believe in Vedic astrology,
Yeah.
including me, or
Yes.
predictive astrology. And I've seen people's lives change
Yes.
based on that, because just as an example, people say to me, how can it help you? But if you're warned about something in advance, you can prepare yourself to handle it,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't deflate you too much, as long as you can gather the strength. Tell me, how can psychological astrology help people? Give me some, sometimes I know you worked with people for a long time now and you also teach it. Tell me how you've seen it helping.
All right. So there's many ways that you can help. Now, I come from a psychotherapeutic background. So what I believe is, I believe in helping a person to see within themselves and make connections, to kind of see the bigger picture within themselves, so to speak. So, for example, I had a client who came to me, and very typically, it's not uncommon for people to come in with relationship issues. Why am I
Mm-hmm.
not able to get into a stable relationship? So she's saying that I tend to get into a relationship. It starts off very serious. And then later on, the person leaves me or something happens, they move far away, and then we cannot sustain this. So I looked at her chart and I smiled and I said that I understand you feel that, but also try to understand. When I looked at the configurations in her chart, I saw the planet of love, very Venus, which we call the planet of love, technically the planet of what we value. So when we look at Venus, it's really what we value, because we fall in love with what we value in another person, because it's a reflection
Absolutely.
of what I find beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Absolutely.
value system. So I saw the planet of Venus, of what we value and what we find beautiful and love, therefore, was connected to the planet which we call Uranus, really. And Uranus
Okay.
is a really rather odd bedfellow, if you don't mind me saying, with Venus. Because while Venus is looking for intimacy and connection, Uranus wants to be independent. He is a bit like the rebel iconoclast who needs space and freedom to basically be himself and be an individual. So I said, it's interesting that you are identifying with the Venus within yourself and you are projecting your Uranian urges onto the other person.
Mm,
So I'm using
I
the term
see.
over here because for those who are not familiar, projection is a psychological mechanism that we do where there's unconscious contents within me which I'm not aware of or I'm uncomfortable with. So I actually pick it up in the other person. So for example, if I think
Yeah.
someone's very critical of me, it's a reflection of how self-critical I am, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So this particular woman found it very hard to understand how men were not really committing to her. And I said, why don't you reflect upon what would it be like? What changes would you need to make in your life if you actually married someone or lived in with them or whatever you want to do? And she said, oh my goodness, I wouldn't be able to do half the
Mm,
things that I'm doing. I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of them. So I said, that's fine. You don't have to let go of them. But if you are conscious of your fear of suffocation, you can work with that in a creative way that you can
mm-hmm.
find a balanced relationship instead of living it out through someone else. So it's about
Yeah.
finding balanced ways of working with the inner dynamics within yourself.
So did she ultimately find somebody? Because I know a lot of people in the world looking for love.
Yes, she did, but it ultimately ended up working for her. She acknowledged to herself that she had too much she wanted to do in this lifetime. So she was much more happy with the long distance relationship. They live in the same
Oh, I
country,
see.
but she needs a lot of space. And she started to realize
Mm,
when she meets a man who is very wants to kind of get married and have children and create a nest, she runs away and she gets very suffocated. So that was something she had to psychologically work through a lot in
mm,
sessions. And it was also a recreation of her parents' relationship, which we also explored in the sessions. We started to
ah,
realize how the mother was very clingy with the father and the father was very resentful of the mother, and how she absorbed this in the very early environment. Her parents never said this to her, but she picked it up as a child. Children are very sensitive. So this
yeah.
is a dilemma, an ancestral or a family dilemma that she sought to resolve.
Fascinating. So you're saying that a lot of issues that potentially crop up in our lives, if we fully understand ourselves, we can soothe the path.
Very much so. Socrates had an expression saying, the unexamined life is not worth living. And he also said, know thyself. And there's a difference between intellectually knowing myself, Anshu. I can intellectually know myself, but really to know the bottom of myself, the depths of my soul, my deepest fears, my inhibitions, my anger, my pain, and actually bring that up into the light of day and work with it creatively, really is what psychological astrology can help a person to do. So many people say, for example, I want to be successful, but they don't realize how they unconsciously self-sabotage themselves because they don't
Mm,
actually themselves.
mm.
They don't actually
And
truly believe that they're they are good enough. So that's something to work on within a psychological astrology session. We can very faithfully see that in the chart and the time and tide of when it is a fruitful time to work on this, when this issue is going to be opened up, and when it's a great time to look into this.
okay, I mean that this is absolutely fascinating, Arya. I mean, it's even though it's not predictive astrology, it sounds like it sounds like it could potentially make a huge difference to people's lives. Explain to me the difference between psychological astrology and predictive astrology, whether Vedic, whether Western?
Sure, that's a great question. Now, I find that usually, and I mean, I have great respect for Vedic astrology and predictive astrology. My nani actually was a predictive Vedic astrology and a great one at that. So I have great, profound respect for it. But usually, when a person is coming for a predictive astrology, Western or Indian astrology, they are looking for answers, and they're looking for an all-knowing, omniscient sage, right? Who knows?
Right.
Thinks, who knows all the answers and is going to depart the information to you. Should I marry this person? Will I have children? Will I have money? These are very typical questions. So in many ways, it's like a patient and a doctor. Doctor says something, prescribes it. So it's coming from the premise that it is a deterministic universe that we live in. And I definitely feel that there's certain things which are in our card. There's certain things in our cards, in our destiny. But psychological is coming from the premise it's how you play your cards. We do have choices, but we need to also know ourselves to know when we're coming from a compulsion and when we're coming from a healthy need. So when I'm looking at astrology, I'm really actually not looking at telling people, because I, as a therapist, have people dependent on me. I'm not looking to have people come here and for me to tell them and then they feel that I know more than them. I try to empower them and help them to understand and reflect upon the patterns of the past and how it's still coming into the future and in the present. For example, if a person is coming from an astrological planetary position of Venus Chiron. Venus again is the planet of love and what we fall in love with, and Chiron is the wounded healer. I'm giving the example of Marilyn Monroe, for example. She came with the unconscious expectation in this lifetime that love will hurt me. So she was drawn. Yes, she was drawn to men who would unconsciously, she didn't consciously wake up and say, I'm going to fall in love with this and that person, who were not emotionally available or not emotionally, mature enough to love her in the way that she wanted. Because she didn't love her the way she wanted, whereas someone else going to fill a void in our lives, really. So perhaps if she was able to become aware of this, if maybe this had existed at the time that she was living and she had that opportunity, the thing with Venus and Chiron, maybe predictive astrology looks at it, kind of casting it in stone. I do believe that creative options we have. If I work on my self-worth, I will definitely attract it in the universe. I know that firsthand. I've known that also with the clients that I've seen. I've seen some of them transform and change their lives because they've done the inner work on themselves.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So just to clarify this for people, say someone was to come to you with a man's chart and say, should I marry this man? Is he the right man for me? The opposite of that, if they were to come to you and say, what kind of man do I need in my life? And is this the sort of man who would work for me? Is that the difference? Very subtle, but yes, is that the difference?
It is, in a way. What I would invite the person to do, the client to do, is when I also look at a chart, I look at the inner feminine and masculine in a chart. So I would also invite them, as a woman, we have an inner masculine. And if we are not connected to the masculine, knowing what you want, knowing how to get it in life, I would live it out vicariously through the man in my life.
Okay.
And my masculine and feminine are not connected. They're not having a conversation. I'm very disconnected from if I'm very masculine and I'm disconnected from my emotional needs, I will meet someone who is at that same point in their lives. So
you will need someone.
Yes.
Okay, explain that further.
So what I mean to say is that the world is a reflection of what's inside, right? That basically talking about. So if I do not know how to balance my emotional needs and nurture myself and also do what I need to do, be goal oriented and get what I want, if I'm not able to find that inner balance of the yin and yang, so to speak, I will find someone who's an exact reflection of that. Maybe my polarity, but it'll be a reflection of me, maybe the opposite end of a coin, so to speak. The more I'm able to work on myself and balance that, the more I will meet a person who's at that same balance. So like attracts like anyways.
Okay, interesting. So you're saying if I'm not able to balance my inner yin and yang, you're not saying that I need the opposite. You're saying I will attract the same thing. Is that correct?
I mean to say is that we will, the extent to which we're able to integrate the masculine or feminine is the extent we will meet a person who's at the same point.
Okay. 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 Because the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. That's interesting, because we probably need the opposite, but you're saying work on yourself, and that's what will sort out the outside.
I mean, I think it's great when relationships balance each other, and that's wonderful. I think people come to me when that's not working for them in the way that they want, right? And that's when it's looking at oneself. It's great. I mean, we live through our relationships, and they enhance our lives in many ways. But the problem,
Absolutely.
yes.
So tell me, any advice or astrology takeaways for these current times, which are so unpredictable? And, we've never seen times like this before. So what do you think? Any advice for the different charts, for the different planets, for the different sun signs?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of astrological things that are going on at the moment. We have been going through difficult times with COVID. I mean, there's a lot going on with Saturn, which is the planet of our greatest challenges, but also our greatest growth. Saturn, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, a celestial school teacher who kind of raps you on your knuckles and say, stop being so external, please work on yourself, stop being focusing on your outer life, and work on yourself as a soul, as an individual. So we saw through the COVID times how Saturn was going through that time, and is now inviting us to go back into the outer world, because a lot of people have worked on themselves, a lot of people have
Mm-hmm.
stop trying to run away from themselves and actually reflect upon, what kind of life do I want? What kind of person do I want to be? And re-examine our goals, so to speak, which is what Saturn in Aquarius did for us. I also feel that right now it is a good time to look at a few things. Sagittarians is a very important time for everybody, because we all have each zodiac sign in our chart. It's a question of how much emphasis we have. But for Sagittarius, people in particular, this is a great time, because there was a new moon yesterday, and it's also
Mm-hmm.
trickling now as well. So when the sun and moon are in Sagittarius, we consider it a new moon, when they're on the exact same degree of Sagittarius together. And this is a great time to focus on the Sagittarian energy. Sagittarius is a fire sign. So it is the sign of intuition. It is a sign of wisdom. It is the sign of goals and aspirations, and trusting, having faith in yourself, and having faith in providence that my dreams or my hopes or aspirations will come true. So it's a great time, yesterday and today, even tonight, to actually light a candle in the darkness and set out intentions as to how I would like the month to be. What are my hopes? What are my aspirations? What are my goals? As well as what might be my inhibitions that are getting in the way of what I want to manifest in the world at the moment. I don't know where everybody,
Okay.
for example, I don't know. It depends where Sagittarius falls in everybody's chart. But this is something that anybody else can do as well.
Okay.
This has also been a very um, busy time for a lot of other people as well right now. I was just thinking about how Mars, the planet of Mars, is retrograding. Now, let me break this down into more simpler ways of explaining it. Mars is the planet, and I would invite you to look at him like a god or a deity, because that's how the Greeks really imagined them, their personas. So the Mars, all of us have Mars in our chart. It is the planet of our drive. It is the planet of our masculine side, knowing what I want, knowing how to get it. And it is also the libido, so our life force. It is about how we go forth, how we go into the world, whether it's with great confidence or with great assertion. Now, what's happening is the planet Mars is what we call retrograding. So it looks as though
Mm-hmm.
it's basically been put on brakes. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
bit like, imagine like Mars, the god of war, kind of going on a chariot, and someone has kind of like, he's got stuck in the mud. So this can be a little bit frustrating for other people, for people on a collective level right now. The reason that Mars is in retrograde, because instead of going into the world, we are also being invited to reflect upon what is it that we desire the most. Because sometimes there can be a big distinction between what we think we want and what we need and want on a deeper level. So when Mars
Okay.
retrogrades, now Vedic astrology kind of looks at it as a bad time. I don't look at it as a bad time. I think it's a question of really taking an energy and trying to work creatively within it. I think this is a great time for people on a collective level. It started in end October, and it's going to go on till January 12th. It's a great time to reassess your goals, your drive, and how you want to go about getting what you want. So trying to push other people, trying to be too aggressive, is not a great idea at the moment. It's a better time to be clear within yourself. It's also Mars is in the sign of Gemini, and Gemini is the
Okay.
sign of communication. So this is a great time to think before you speak. It's not a great time to just spill out whatever is in your heart. It's a great time to journal. So I would really invite people
Right.
to journal, to write, and get more in touch and in tune with themselves. It's also a time of a time to reflect because of Gemini about our promises and our commitments. Mars in Gemini in retrograde is inviting us not to overcommit. Please do not kind of get too manic and spread yourself thin because that's going to backfire on you. So Mars in Gemini can be frustrating. We do not realize we're being invited to slow down a bit and actually find a steadier pace. It is also a good time to, like I said, mental clarity. So reassess your goals, think twice before you go into anything, and communicate with others. So either the verbal or written communication, it's a time to take a pause before you go full throttle, so to speak. And when Mars goes direct in January 12th, that would be when you can really move forward with your plans, with your ideas, with the concepts that you want to manifest.
Okay. So you're saying this is a time for thinking, for planning,
Yes.
rather than doing.
Yes, rather than doing and overcommitting. I think that's the thing. It's really inviting you to be crystal clear as opposed to kind of going along with what you think someone else wants to hear or what you think is the right thing to do. It's about, no, I need to be clear within myself. My actions need to reflect what I think. There shouldn't be a discrepancy right now because it's going to muddle things up.
Okay. Okay. What else? What else can you tell us for the different signs? Air signs, fire signs, water signs.
At the moment, I would also talk about the transits, and tomorrow, which is the 20th, today is the 24th of
24th.
and this is a very beautiful time where Mercury is trining Chiron. I would say the next few days, today and tomorrow onwards, are very important times where we reflect upon where we are scared to also communicate and where we are really scared to express ourselves. Because this is a time where we might feel wounded and we need to kind of let go of our inhibitions and fears. So again, journaling is a great time. This is on a collective level for everybody. I would also say on the 25th of November, Mercury will be trining Venus in transits. And that is an excellent time to be expressing your value and your worth to the world. These are all taking place in the sign of Sagittarius. So Sagittarians are abuzz this month. Their sun is in Sagittarius, the moon has just gone in Sagittarius. So it's a big time for, I would say, Sagittarians as well as Gemini, because Gemini is the sign opposite to Sagittarius. It's a great time for people to, and on a general level as well, but particularly Sagittarians, to speak their worth and also show their value and worth to other people and to put yourself forth. This is not the time to be shy. This is a great time to be bold and promote yourself in a healthy sort of way. Let other people see the light that you're shining in. I would also want to say something about Aquarians, because Aquarians have gone through a rather challenging time because the transiting planet of Saturn, which is our greatest difficulties and challenges, but also which leads to our greatest potential, has been going over the sign of Aquarius. So it's been a difficult time because Aquarians by nature are an air sign. They like to move, they like to learn, they love to create a sense of community. And Saturn has been holding them back with various issues, whether it's with their father or for male figures, or holding their potential back. They may not feel that I'm able to manifest my potential. But I would like to say that Saturn does everything for a reason. He's like the wise old man, the white bearded old man, so to speak, the archetypal wise old man that we speak of in Jungian psychology, who is inviting you to reflect and also to not do things to prove yourself, but to just be yourself and be more clear within yourself, and also to integrate more creativity in what they're doing and trust their intuition more. Aquarians are very much an intellectual sign. So they're very much in the realms of ideas. What they don't tend to tap into is their innate creativity and their intuition. So Saturn has been holding them down to make them develop their creative dimension as well and integrate that with their intellect.
Okay, fascinating.
Yes, I can completely imagine what Aquarius is going through right now. There's just so much Aquarius energy, and it will get better. Saturn is going to move into the sign of Pisces. So, sorry, all Pisces out there. It's going to be its own.
Mm,
Saturn is actually not a bad planet per se. Vedic astrology looks at him as a rather difficult, like I said, a hard taskmaster. But Saturn is
mhm,
like the teacher who is trying to bring out the best in you and trying to help you to evolve and manifest your potential on a higher level. So, with people with Saturn in Pisces, they might also feel the same block that Aquarians have been going through for 2.5 years from January onwards. But I would also say, having worked with Saturn transits in clients as well as on myself, it's the kind of like when you've had to work your hardest and face your
mhm.
fears in order to live your dreams. That's how I would describe Saturn.
Okay. Yeah, because in, like you're saying, in Vedic astrology, everyone starts freaking out during the time of the Saturn influence in their horoscopes.
Yes, very much so. He used to be feared. He does bring hardships, but he brings hardships to the extent that you resist learning his lessons. They say, in a wise man once told me that the universe is always trying to teach us. He first knocks very gently on the door and we ignore it. And then he knocks harder and then we ignore it until the door has to be torn down before we listen to our developing our higher self and our more self actualized self.
Mm, absolutely. And that's very, very well said. Um, I've been studying uh, the Indian scriptures a little bit. And that's the message that, our whole lifetime is about taking messages from the universe. So, yeah, your wise man was very wise.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
okay. So, any other takeaways for any of the other sun signs?
I would also like to mention, since we are wellness curated, that a lovely thing that the chart also reflects is our body and how our relationship to our body with and our potential in terms of our body and also where stress comes out. So each zodiac sign, interestingly enough, is a reflection of the different pressure points in our body and where stress comes out. So, for example, with your moon in Aries tends to get migraines when they suppress their anger.
Ah,
The moon in
oh,
Taurus,
wow.
yes. So when the moon in Taurus suppresses their voice, that is when they start to have throat issues.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. The moon in Gemini, when they do not listen to themselves and where they do not speak their truth, so to speak, which is Gemini is all about communication, that is where lung issues ensure.
Okay.
So and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting. I mean, I could talk about this all day, really, but it's really interesting that,
But is it literally when you're going through the sun signs, you're moving down? So you said
yes,
moon in Aries is the
yes,
head. Move
yes.
it, moon. The next one is the Pisces is the throat. Moon in Pisces.
Taurus is
Moon in
it. Moon in Taurus is the throat.
Taurus. Yeah, and then you said Gemini, which you said is the lungs.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So it does literally start from the head and it goes down to the feet, which is Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac, and which is the soul. So when people have feet issues, they're not listening to their heart. They're not listening to their wisdom. So it's very,
Ah.
since we are looking at a health portal and channel, how the psychological astrology, actually all astrology, very faithfully depict this. Now, on a predictive level, we will just say that illness falls upon us. But on a
Mm, mm,
psychological astrology level, what I would look at when someone is going through a physical ailment, and also as a therapist, I look at which part energy of themselves are they ignoring or they're not honoring, because all parts of our body, like all the gods and goddesses in astrology, need to be honored. If we pay attention to one dimension of my life and not another, somehow it's going to create some unrest and turmoil, therefore disharmony in our body and discomfort
right.
within the whole.
Yes. So it's a great way, psychological astrology seems like a great way of maximizing your wellness and your
Yes,
health. Because if there is an issue, then it's obviously related to some part of your life that you're, like you said very nicely, not honoring.
yes, yes.
Okay.
We all have
Makes a
all
lot of sense.
we have all 12 zodiac signs in our chart, and we all have all the 12 different energies and dimensions of our lives, and if we don't honor it, sometimes they come and they kind of knock on our door or push themselves to be seen and heard, acknowledged and respected.
Beautiful. Very, very beautifully put, Arya. Thank you so much for this absolutely incredible chat that we've had. I was talking to Arya Timblo on psychological astrology. Thank you, Arya.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure and a joy, Anshu.